Thank you for taking the time to listen to our weekly service. This is a listener-supported ministry, and we ask that you pray and see what God would have you give. Now let's get to our sermon for today.
Okay, today we're going to look at the Apostle Paul again, and this is during the time when he wrote the book of Philippians. Paul is under many circumstances that we would consider bad and be a problem. But first, let's look at verses 3 through 6 here of our text this morning. I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine, for you all, making requests with joy, for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing, that he which has begun a good work in you will perform it unto the day of Jesus Christ. Now let's look at Paul's life and how he's an example to us. Where was Paul at this time? He was in prison. Well, we call house arrest. So actually he wasn't in a dungeon. He happened to be in the governor's house under house arrest. He is alone, but does get visitors, visited by those, and I'm not going to turn to it, but you can find it in Acts 28:30, where it talks about that, where he actually got visitors would come and visit him. But he was a prisoner, and he was a prisoner there for 2 years. But we do not see Paul moaning about his circumstances there. Paul's heart was to be out witnessing and visiting the churches that he helped start, trying to start new churches. That's where his heart was, and that's what he really wanted to do. So being in prison kind of kept that from happening. Excuse me. He could not really fellowship with others in the sense that he couldn't go out and talk with them. Okay, I mean, some people did come and visit, but not everybody took a trip all the way to Rome just to visit him. Where he would be, through his travels and missionary travels, he went to a lot of different places. He was out of touch and by himself, even though he could write, and he wrote letters and all. Paul explains in verse 12 through 21, which we don't have to turn there, but you can make a note there, that this was one of the most difficult and painful times for his ministry, because he couldn't go out and do what he wanted to do. But we also see in verse 4 that Paul was full of joy during this time. And that's kind of what I want to challenge you with this morning. Now turn to Galatians chapter 5, verse 22. Galatians 5:22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, and faith. Now, I've tried to teach you in the past. I don't know, hopefully you all got this down. God doesn't put words in a sentence by accident. There's always a number progression. Okay? Love is the most important. It's number 1. Number 2 is joy. And I want you to think about that. Joy was the second one. Well, obviously you can't have joy without love. And if you start studying the Bible, anytime God puts things in a progression like that, it means something. And it's worth studying and looking at. So I want you to understand that God feels that joy is a very important thing. It's number 2 of the fruit of the spirits. Don't we all want to have a joyful life and enjoy life, have a happy life? Get up every day, and enjoy every day to the day you die, or we get raptured. And that's possible. And like I told Dwayne, and I tell other people to get saved, I said, please understand, problems don't go away because you get saved. Because some young Christians think that. And they think, well, God's going to take care of everything. Well, God will. He will work you through it, but He's not going to take the problems away. He'll help you walk through them. And you get the joy knowing God's in control, like I just mentioned about the banquet. I wasn't going to let that get me down because we only got half of what we were thriving for. We weren't doing some special project. That was just to meet our budget. and all. But it doesn't matter because God's been faithful the first 18 years. Why wouldn't He be faithful the next 18 years if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing? See, that's the key. As long as I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, God will do what He's supposed to do. And this is His ministry. It's not mine. I'm only one of the workers. I work up here. You work down there. We're all workers in the ministry. So I want us to take a look at the Apostle Paul. Why is Paul full of joy? What about joy itself? Joy has a way of removing everything that brings you down. If you're happy, you have a tendency not to be let down about anything. If you're always have a joyful life, if you're always excited. And I'm sure you've met people, whether they were saved or not, that always seem to be happy. I had, I guess, the privilege of, I think I've mentioned this once before, of a guy I was witnessing to. God, it's been so long I forgot his name now. He lived up off of 183. But anyhow, I went into where he had the shop there on Wade Hampton, and his wife, that was the secretary, and she said, you know, we were talking about you this weekend, and we noticed that you're always happy. And I thought, wow, because a lot of people say, well, Glenn, you don't have a smile on your face. That's because I'm thinking of something off in the distant world. And it's not because I'm not happy. I said, I'm always happy inside. But it's that joy. And I honestly think when you are happy, when you have a joyful life, it spills off to people around you. People start wondering, or they'll ask questions. I like to have what you have. And joy has a way of helping us to forget our problems. People today, they go out and they want to get drunk. They want to take drugs. And they do that to forget what they're going through. The problem is you end up with a hangover. But, you know, spiritually, trusting in the Lord, having a joyful life through the Lord, you don't have the hangover the next day. What you have is joy when you woke up, knowing God is in control. By the way, learn something today. Learn a words and say this as often as possible whenever you need it. And if you're like me, I say it a bunch of times every day. Constantly repeat to yourself, God's in control. Every time something hits you, just say, God's in control. Keep reminding yourself, because we're human. We get weak. When did Satan come after Christ? After he was hungry and everything. He always attacks us at our weakest point in our life. And generally at our weakest point, we do the worst damage. Some of us like to eat ice cream, you know, and you get you get weak and you go buy a gallon of ice cream and eat it. You enjoy eating ice cream, but you should have ate it. And so you kind of know what I'm talking about. Joy comes from God and is a better way and more permanent in one's life. It's a gift of God who gives to all who look to Him for all the things. And Paul does not let circumstances get in his way. And he had a lot of circumstances to get in his way. Now, to bring this up, well, how did he use this stuff? Well, number one, memories. He used memories, which produced good thoughts. He kept thinking about what took place. That's what's in the letter here, what he's writing. He says, I remember. Matter of fact, well, I don't want to jump the gun here. I'll bring it up in just a moment. But that's one reason why God gives us testimonies, tells us. It's a command of God for us to give testimonies. When you get testimonies here, obviously if I hear it and how God blessed and worked in your life, I get excited. But it's also for the giver. It's you that giving the testimony, reminding yourself what God's done for you. And if you keep talking about it in the future, I don't mean every Sunday you say the exact same testimony, but you could maybe a month from now saying, you know, I'm just rejoiced what God did a month ago. And it's a memory. You keep in your memory. I think about my dad. Right now, that's all I got about my dad. I mean, I got pictures and stuff like that, but I got pictures in my office. I got the one picture with doing his favorite thing, fishing, surf fishing in the bay, Chesapeake Bay. And I turn around there and I think of my dad. And it produces memories and happy memories I don't look at the bad things. I look at the good things we have. And whatever strange reason it is, it must have been the most effective thing that happened to me when I was young. My greatest memory I have of my dad is when we're in a fishing boat, and it was a rowboat, no motor, in the Chesapeake Bay, crabbing with my brother. And then I remember that we had about 2 bushels of crab. They were sitting in on the top, and they fell over, and there was more. They were all loose, and we jumped in the water. We had to gradually get them back in the basket before we could get back in the. Well, we were barefooted too. See, none of us had shoes or anything. I didn't want to get my toe, but anyhow. But memories, and Paul used memories here, and he praised God and gave honor and glory for the things he had done, to remember what God has done. Now look in verse 3 of our main thing on the sheet. He says, I thank God upon every remembrance of you. See, he's talking about memories. He's talking about all these things he's thinking about while he's in prison. And he's thinking about all the good things that happened to the church of Philippians. And this is the lesson we have. We got to look at the good things in life, remember them, so when something happens, we can go, well, yeah, that happened, but God can take me through this. Why? Because he did it in the past. And you can start saying, he did it then, he did it then, he did it then. I have all these things. I know God can do it, but we're human and we have to remind ourselves. If we forget, we're going to let the circumstance grab us and draw us down. And let me tell you, I know everybody in this room agrees with what I'm about to say. Nobody wants to be around somebody that's grumpy. What's the one question that you fear when you go to somebody and you say, here's the question, how are you doing? Because you're afraid they're going to give you a list of negativeness. Oh, I had this, that. That's not what you really wanted to hear. That's not why you asked that question. What you want to hear is, I had a good day. I had a great week. That's what you want to hear. I got to the point, I don't care how bad my day is, I'm not going to tell anybody that, because they don't want to hear it anyhow. But Paul recalls the good times God had worked with the Philippians, and he rejoices in that, even though it's been a while. Paul does not dwell on the circumstances, but what God has done. Paul is always praying to God too. It says here in remembrance. He says, always in prayer. This is verse 4. In every prayer of mine, for you making requests with joy. He's constantly praying for these people and praying for. Do you pray for your mom and your dad and you pray your brothers, sisters, your kids and grandkids and friends? And what about the people that where you hope to see? Don and Lisa right now, been praying for them. Dwayne and his family, his circumstances, and just keep adding. If you do what I did, if the list gets too long, divide it and do it every other day. That's what I ended up doing. And I keep adding to it. And eventually I guess I'll have to divide it again somehow. But to keep praying. Joy comes when we pray for others. And this is a key that God taught me the hard way. When you start having a right relationship with God, you pray less about yourself, no matter what problems you have. Now, here's why I do. I know my God's in control of my situation. I know he can either eliminate it, get rid of it, or he can wait a while. And most of my prayer ends up, about 80% of my prayer are for other people. Every one of you in my prayer list. And I pray for you. And I pray about you. Or whatever it is. That's why I like hearing specifics in your requests and all. Because I think about that. And by the way, the reason why I don't write it down is because he sends me the list of the prayer on Monday. Just so you know that. So in case you look there and go, how come you never write anything down? I got a great secretary. He emails me the list. I think when you start praying for others, God honors that and starts taking care of you even more. And by the way, I'm not saying you can't pray for yourself. Yeah, you can. But the majority of prayer, I think, if you really have a love and you got that relationship, you're going to be worried more about everybody else and less about yourself. But it doesn't mean you can't pray for yourself. But it's just something that I found happened kind of, I didn't plan it. It just started happening as I got closer to the Lord. You know, and I got a lot closer to get to. But as I keep looking at, I'm finding myself more concerned for other people than I am about myself. And God's doing such a great job with me. If I try to fix myself, I'll do a lousy job and mess it up anyhow. So the Philippians see Paul's imprisonment as a setback. If you read, study the book, they actually think it is a setback. But Paul, on the other hand, sees it as a blessing. Now, he doesn't like being there, as I told you earlier, and it says it there. He doesn't like being in prison. But he takes advantage of what he has. And through God's leading, think about this. Now, I got to thinking how God works things out. Paul, being as busy as he was, traveling as much as he was, when was he going to have time to write the book of Philippians? Being in prison was the perfect place for him. He was in house arrest, so he was in a nice prison for a change for 2 years. And God inspired him to write the book of Philippians during that time, which we have now in the Bible. To me, it makes sense. It just goes to show you God being in control. Now, this also was a time when others were stimulated to get boldness. I want you to think about how this all works and how God uses it. Paul's in prison, so he's not making his normal routine and going out where he wanted to. Guess what happened? People in the Philippian church and all started taking his place and started keeping the ministry going. Kept going out and visiting. The people who came to visit him, he would talk to them. They'd go out, and people started helping. So what it did was God used that to help others get busy for him. Talk about God being smart. Think about it. I mean, covered every base here. Paul does not spend time looking at the bad side, but at the good side. And look in Acts chapter 16, verse 25. Back here in Acts, you have Paul and Silas are in jail. And this time they're in a regular jail. And not only are they in the jail and locked up in a place where rats don't even want to live, let alone anybody else. It just reminded me, I watched part of Charlotte's Web yesterday. I was over there visiting my son, and he was playing that for his daughter. But anyhow.
It's good to know.
Okay, thank you. I got caught up. My wife kept saying, "Let's go," and she said, "No, my son said, Dad, Mom's waiting for you." And my wife comes back in and said, "He's caught up in whatever's on that TV set." 16:25, and at midnight. Oh, let me finish. They're in a cell, in a prison. Not only are they locked up in that cell, but they got shackles and chained to the wall. Okay, so this is all. I mean, they got them pretty good. And at midnight, it says, Paul and Silas prayed and sang praises unto God, and the prisoners heard them. Did he let circumstances keep him down? No. They're sitting there and they're singing out loud. Everybody hears them. They're praying and praising God and singing in a dungeon where a rat doesn't want to live. Chained to the wall. I guess they could sit down or something. I don't know anything about that part. And what happened? An earthquake took place. And the next thing you know, it says the chains fell off of them. The doors popped open. Anybody could walk out of that prison. And the jailer comes running in, and he's about to commit hara-kiri because he knew the governor was going to have his head. He was worried about it. And Paul yells out, "We're all still here. Nobody left." And the jailer and his house came to know Christ as their Savior. And it's all there if you want to read it all. Now my question is, and I want you to think about this. When you're at your worst time during the day, can you sing and praise God? Can people around you see how happy you are when they see how stretched out you should be? If Paul can do it, you can do it. I can do it. If Paul can do it. He was human. He wasn't somebody with a special power. He just had a tremendous love for his God, and he was sold out. And because of prayer and singing with joys in their hearts, people came to know Christ that day. And it wouldn't have happened if they let their circumstances get them down, and they never sang and they never prayed because they were in prison. And Paul could be saying, I'm in prison again? God has seemed to be spending a lot of time in prison. A joyful person is delighted to be part of a fellowship. They cannot wait to go to church. They can't wait for Bible studies. You can't wait to get together. Why? Because you have such good time together. You fellowship together. You have a great time together. You would rather be with a Christian than you would with an unsaved person. You have so much in common. So much to share with each other. But you do got to open your mouth and talk. You know, you got to go and share with each other. Talk about, hey, you know, we do a ride or something. You can come up and say, you know, I remembered your testimony. I can't tell you what a blessing it was to me. I see how your life is changing. Not because they told you, because you see something happening. Now, you just look how it affected y'all watching Dwayne and what he looked like. Look how it affected you just to see it on a video. Could you imagine being in person and talking with him? Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know if I've ever been down enough to sit there and take off and walk for 40 miles. And I love it with his dog. But you know, God used all that. God used it all. The question is, do you have joy about the possibilities of not just your life and what's capable of God doing in your life, but do you come in here with the joy and the possibilities of what could happen with State Line Motorcycle Ministry? And what I mean by that is the joy and possibilities. Now, this next weekend, you're all going to be someplace. Okay? Can you be excited about the possibility that someone may come to know Christ because of you this Saturday and this Sunday? See, I may be up there doing it, but you have your places you're going to be doing it. It might be just, hey, listen, did I lead Dwayne to the Lord? Sure didn't. The whole time, what did he say? Glenn's always praying for me, because every time I talk to him, right now, Randy, you know, I always forget Randy's wife's name. The one that has cancer? You don't? Okay. Well, anyhow. Huh? Darlene? Okay. Every time I see him, I'm telling him, I'm praying for you. And I do. I have them on my list, and I pray for them both. I'm praying for their salvation. I'm praying for his cancer situation, that God would use that to bring him to him. And we have a good relationship. He goes out of his way to come to me and all, just like Evil does. And me and Evil have an extremely close relationship. He comes and tells me things he don't tell anybody else. I don't know why, but he did. And to think, the first time I met him, he couldn't get rid of me fast enough. That's when he was probating with the Hell's Angels. But I enjoy my relationship with him. And I'm hoping God will use that. And we look for it. And you have that same situation with anybody you have the ability to talk to. Now, if you go to the thing and keep your mouth shut and don't do anything, or don't open your mouth and invite them or whatever, I don't believe in hassling anybody. But I do believe if the opportunity is there to talk and ask. So they can come and grow and get closer to the Lord. Paul never concerned himself with the now. Think about that. He always concerned himself with the future. Now was not a problem. No circumstances. Joy. Now look back in verse 6 of our text this morning. He says, being confident of this very thing, that he which begun a good work in you will perform it unto the day of Jesus Christ. Paul sees that when God begins a work in a person, that which is salvation, he's going to see through it to the end. Again, he looks at what can happen and what the future can bring through Christ. Now, think about this. The first thing he says here is being confident. Paul is confident of this thing. He's totally convinced of this thing. No wonder he has joy about the now and the future, because he's got confidence in his God. And he got confidence that when God starts something, he's going to go through it and he's going to fix it. Now, some of us may present problems where we don't do what God would have us to do. So we're the problem that prevents God from working in our lives. But if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we're all not perfect, we all do it at different rates. Whoever, I always tell people, who's on fire for God, who's God doing the most for? Look at the person who's doing the most for God. The person who's doing the least gets a little. You get what you give. And God's that way. Now, occasionally, through His mercy and grace, He might bestow something on you that you don't deserve. But for the most part, in a general sense, the more closer you get to God, the closer He gets to you. When you start pulling away and doing anti-this and anti-that, God pulls away from you. That's just the way it's going to work. He's a holy God. Don't forget, He's holy. He's sinless. He can't dwell around sin. He couldn't do it with His Son. What makes you think He's going to do it with you or me? And God, the best part about it is every time I fall down, every time you fall down, God's going to pick you right back up. See, that's the confidence that you can have, knowing that. Just keep that. God will pick us up every single time. Oh, I hit the button wrong. Come on. Get back. There you go. I did see Pastor Brooks finally used his smartphone with his notes on it. I thought that was pretty cool because I've never seen him. He's always still using paper. Sometimes, and I'm afraid this is what happens with some people. I'm failing God, so then you back up. I don't like what's happening to me, and you get angry. Where is my God when I need Him the most? And I've heard people say that, and they get aggravated, and they draw away from the Lord. Because when they felt they needed Him now, whatever the situation was, and they didn't see God working now, they withdrew from the Lord. They stopped doing what they're supposed to be doing. I'm not going to read my Bible anymore. I'm not going to pray. What's the use? God's not listening to me. Well, you know what I always tell people? There's a reason for it. Or God's testing you again. God knows when the time is right for everything. And that's something we just got to get a hold of. That's why I keep saying, repeat, God's in control. God's in control. Just keep repeating. I do it every day. I got to do it. Every day we get up, there's a new problem. Something else happens. Oh, I was going to mention this, and I kind of skipped over it. When we moved, we gave my son our clothes washer and dryer. And it was working perfectly. We took it over there, he started it up, and it leaked out of the front at the bottom. Well, it never did that before. And so you know how tight it's in some of these closets. It was tight in there, and he said, "I don't have time." Well, the other day we took it out and looked at it, but it kept leaking on the floor. He put rags under there to try to do laundry. It was getting too bad, and we started looking. And I picked it. He picked it up, tilted. I looked under there with the flashlight. I said, "Son," there ain't nothing broken down here that you can." And the move would not have broken anything. I can't see where the dolly, he thought the dolly might have came up and then hit something plastic down. And there's a lot of plastic, but nothing it could have hit. So we're wondering, what on earth is the problem here? So I said, why don't we run it to see if we can see where the water's coming out and we try to do that. It took us about 2 hours And I finally figured out, I happened to figure out the problem because I was in the right spot at the right time. We closed it back up and everything, and there's glass on the top, so you can see inside. The top flap is glass. Well, I'm sitting there, and you have this soap dispenser here underneath that you can see, and there's one for fabric softener and another one for bleach. Well, I saw the water coming in the dispenser for the soap. And I thought it was a turbo coming through there. I'm like, why? It's coming up. I said, son, we can turn it off. He said, what's the matter? I said, this doesn't make any sense, but I'm just going to take an educated guess. For some reason, you got too much pressure on this line. He says, you think? I said, I don't know. I said, start turning it down. So at the wall, he started turning it down to where it was an even flow, solved the problem. He has an unregulated line in the wall, not the rest of the house, just on the washer. Who would have ever thought? Took us 2 hours to figure it out because we took off, I took off the back, took us out because we're looking for something broken. And the whole time it was just, he had, I don't know what the actual unregulated. No, but it's supposed to be regulated. It should be about 120 pounds. This is it's unregulated. In other words, it's coming off the street to that faucet. For some reason, that's the way they did. Like the front of my house is unregulated on the outside. The back is regulated. But there's, it's amazing what that you can do with unregulated pressure. But you don't want it on your appliances. So anyhow, we figured that out. But it took us some time to do it. And all. Problems are always going to pop in. Some of them are going to be weird and stupid problems. And all. As simple as it was, what happened? It took longer to figure out because it was too simple. Who ever heard of unregulated water causing a problem like that? But that's what happens in our lives with different things that pop into our lives each day. And Paul says that he was confident that everything that God did, he will finish and that he will do. And through God's grace, as we live our lives, God will reflect that. So the key to the book of Philippians, that one of the key notes is the word joy. It's also found in Ephesians. But there's other lessons there too, but that's one of the keys. Philippians is not a long book. Take time and read it this week when you have some time. Read through the book. Read a chapter a day. I think it's 4 chapters in it, if I remember right. And let me encourage you to read it. Enjoy life through God. The joy is available for all of us. I'm trying to challenge you today. See what happened, how Paul did it, how he used it, and it's available to each of us through our problems, whatever they might be. Joy unspeakable and full of glory. And that's what we're going to sing right now.
We pray that we have been a blessing to you. For further assistance, call us at 864-270-1472 anytime. Send email to info@stlmm.org or visit our website at www.stlmm.org. Like any ministry, it costs money to operate. Please consider supporting this ministry as God leads you with your prayers and your financial gifts by going to www.stlmm.org and clicking on Donations.